The Ferguson rifle was one of the first breech-loading rifles to be put into service by the British military. It fired a standard British carbine ball of .615 caliber and was used by the British Army in the American War of Independence at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, and possibly at the Siege of Charleston in 1780. Its superior firepower was unappreciated at the time because it was too expensive and took longer to produce. The four gunsmiths making Ferguson's ordnance rifle could not make 106 months at 4 times the cost per arm of a musket. Details: the breech of the weapon is closed by 11 starting threads on a tapered screw, and the trigger guard serves as the crank to rotate it. One complete turn dropped the screw low enough to drop a round ball into the exposed breech, followed by a slight overcharge of powder, which was then sheared to the proper charge by the screw as it closed the breech. Since the weapon was loaded from the breech, rather than from the muzzle, it had an amazingly high rate of fire for its day, and in capable hands, it fired 6 to 10 rounds per minute. The action was adapted from the earlier 1720 Isaac de la Chalmette design by Major Patrick Ferguson, 1744–1780, who redesigned it around 1770. He received an English patent in December of 1776, number 1139, on details of the design. Roughly 100 of the ordnance rifles were manufactured by 4 British gun firms, Durs Egg being the most notable, and issued to Ferguson's unit when its members were drawn from numerous light infantry units in General Howe's army. The largest battle in which the rifles were used was the Battle of Brandywine, in which Ferguson was wounded. While he recuperated, his experimental rifle corps was subsequently disbanded. This was in no way due to excessive losses or any political machinations. The unit was an experiment, and the men were always slated to return to their original units. Ferguson's men went back to the light infantry units they had originally come from, and his rifles were eventually replaced with the standard long land pattern musket. Some historians report the surviving rifles were apparently put in storage in New York. But as most surviving Ferguson ordnance rifles known to exist in the U.S. today were war booty taken north during the American Civil War, questions remain as to any possible deployment of Ferguson rifles in the southern campaigns of the American Revolution. To support this, a number of Ferguson rifles were brought north by the North Carolina militia during the War of 1812. They were said to be booty from Kings Mountain. The two main reasons that Ferguson rifles were not used by the rest of the army: the gun was difficult and expensive to produce using the small, decentralized gunsmith and subcontractor system in use to supply the ordnance in early Industrial Revolution Britain. The guns broke down easily in combat, especially in the wood of the stock around the lock mortise. The lock mechanism and breech were larger than the stock could withstand with rough use. All surviving military Fergusons feature a horseshoe-shaped iron repair under the lock to hold the stock together where it repeatedly broke around the weak, over-drilled-out mortise. However, despite an unsubstantiated claim that one of the actions was found at the battle site of Kings Mountain, North Carolina, where Ferguson was killed in action, the only piece of a Ferguson ever found in America from a gun used in action is a trigger guard found in excavations of a British Army camp in New York City. The only association the Ferguson rifle has with the Battle of Kings Mountain is that Patrick Ferguson was there. Experience with early modern replicas, made before the proper screw and thread pitch of the breech block were rediscovered, seemed to indicate that while reloading was rapid, it seemed to be necessary to first lubricate the breech screw, originally with a mixture of beeswax and tallow, or else the replica rifle would foul so much that it needed cleaning after 3 or 4 shots. However, through the research efforts of DeWitt Bailey and others, the properly made reproduction Ferguson rifle, made according to Patrick Ferguson's specifications of the 1770s, can fire beyond 60 shots. In popular culture, The Ferguson Rifle, a book by Louis L'Amour, is not about the rifle specifically, but instead a historical fiction story about someone going out west who was given one of the rifles by Ferguson. The rifle was used by Dewey Lambton for his character Alan Murray, who picked one up at Yorktown. The video game Empire: Total War has a unit of Ferguson riflemen, which use the Ferguson rifle and are only recruitable by the British. In the video game gun, a Ferguson rifle is used by Ned White, the father of protagonist Colton White. It is the third of 3 single-shot rifles overall, the first 2 being long-range sharpshooter rifles, and the second of 2 standard rifles acquired in the game, the other being a Winchester 1866 repeater. In the book on Basilisk Station, the first book of David Weber's Honor Harrington series, an alien firearm is compared to a Ferguson rifle. The rifle is mentioned several times in Geoffrey Watson's book Nelson's Fighting Cocks. In the book Like a Mighty Army, the 7th book in David Weber's Safehold series, a weapons designer for the antagonist, the established church, invents a Ferguson rifle. Thomas Keneally's 1967 Miles Franklin-winning novel, Bring Larks and Heroes, opens with young Corporal Halloran striding through the Australian bush in the early days of convict settlement. Anyone who knew firearms would take great interest in the musket he's got in his right hand. It's a rare model that usually hangs in the company commander's office. Then in Chapter 3, Halloran carried a breech-loading Ferguson, a wonder of its times, capable of downing 3 men a minute.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.